driving home after I picked the boys up from the bus stop, and I came over a crest, only 1.5 kilometres from home, and I had a car on the opposite side of the road. I had enough time to say to the boys, we're going to hit, and then all I heard was the impact noise. I was able to twist my head sort of backwards in the back seat, towards the back seat, and all I got was blue lips. So I knew instantly that he wasn't breathing. We are in the local fire brigade, so everybody that turned up from the fire brigade I knew. My husband was probably the second one there. And I remember him saying, it's okay, Lise, everything's going to be fine. I've got everything under control. Well, someone from the fire brigade started first actually, and they said, Neely's gone. And he said, no. And he just literally pushed him aside and said, he's my son. And he just started CPR on him. And eventually we actually were so lucky we had a emergency nurse that actually happened to be driving home a different way than she normally would from work. And she said to Neil, I'm an ICU nurse, is there anything I can do? He literally just said, he's yours. I've got another son there and my wife's stuck in the car. That was pretty well it until I got into the ambulance.
So the first news we had about Sam coming in is of course not Sam as a person, but we know that there's an 11-year-old who's been involved in a serious motor vehicle crash. We also know that he was essentially unconscious from the moment of the crash onwards, and that raised immediate concerns for us about what might have happened to his head and his spine. And we all took note of a significant bruise which ran across Sam's neck, and that bruise spoke to the high possibility of high spinal injury, and that is an extremely serious situation for Sam.
I knew he was in a life-threatening situation. I didn't know what sort of injury he had. It was probably 4 days roughly afterwards that I found out that he had the injury he had. He probably would never walk again. He had been in a coma, an induced coma.
There were ongoing questions around Sam's life and Sam's death in that moment which needed to be acknowledged. And at that stage, it was a very bleak discussion. We were having, as a team and as a group of clinicians, having to reach out to Sam's family to explain that we weren't sure if he would ever wake up. And if he did wake up, we weren't sure to what life he would wake up to. And so the hardest of discussions were being had, including whether this was a situation which we should continue to actively treat Sam, or whether other measures of comfort should be adopted.
And for my husband to come to me and have that conversation and say, they've told us we need to have a chat, work out what decision we make about our son's life. Very confronting. It's not something you'd wish on anybody, no one ever. And it's something that rips your heart out. It literally just rips your heart out. There's not even words for it, to be honest with you. To say, yeah, let's turn that machine off on our 11-year-old son that has 4 brothers is, it's hard. Very hard.
So even though the discussions remained difficult with Sam's family, there was a turning point. I think a turning point that all of us who were there for it will remember. We were having a discussion as a group of lead clinicians in the intensive care unit where one of the team came forward and said, he's opened his eyes. And that was the first moment in which we gained a sense of possibility for this young injured child.
You know, we didn't know if we'd have brain activity. We didn't know anything. The doctors didn't know. No one knew, because it was quite rare injury. Thank God we didn't do it. You know, he's not Sam, but he is Sam.
he very quickly and very assertively wanted to communicate. So he and Neil established very quickly the eye blinking to tell us that Sam could hear us and could understand us. And even though that happened over a period of time, it happened at a rate that was very encouraging for us.
Seatbelt injuries were very significant on Sam. He was not in a car seat. You can see how well that seatbelt held him in. And I still to this day wonder if it wasn't so low on him, if he was in a car seat and it was positioned in a more neutral, correct position, would that have helped?
So at the time of the accident, Sam was seated in the rear of the car. That's a safe place for a child to be. What Sam didn't have was a booster seat. And that's really the crux of some of the conversations that we think are really important. We started those conversations with Sam's family early because we needed to explain to them how he had come to have the particular pattern of injuries that he had, particularly the injuries to his neck and the spinal cord within his neck. It was almost as if Sam's head has been lifted up off his neck, not detaching it, but creating such terrible stretch and tearing to the spinal cord at that level.
In hindsight, I would have loved to have known what would have been different if he was in a car seat.
It's a sad truth that had Sam been supported by a booster seat in addition to the lap sash seatbelt, that he is likely to have had injuries less severe when we relate that specifically to the injury to the spine. In the event of a crash such as Sam, Lisa and his brother sustained, the forces are enormous. So we can't say that yes, it wouldn't have happened had he been in a booster seat, but the specific bruising from the sash part of the seatbelt to his neck, we can have greater confidence to say that that particular contribution would have been different.
February the 13th, 2019 changed our lives dramatically. Not only do we have a son who needs 24-hour care, and as much as our support workers are amazing and we love them to death, the impact is severe. We have people in our house all day, every day that aren't family. We have therapy people in our house every day. He does schooling from home. His bedroom looks like a hospital room. Doesn't look like a 15-year-old boy's room.
Sam's story is important to share because it demonstrates the reality of why booster seats are necessary in the event of a crash. It demonstrates that many people in our community aren't aware of the safety and importance of a booster seat, particularly when laws allow for much younger and much smaller stature children to go legally without a booster seat.
I mean, obviously you knew as a parent that it's safe for them to be in a car seat, but there was no knowledge of how long for, or it was probably out there, but it wasn't commonly known. It wasn't something that you just instinctively knew, like putting on your seatbelt.
We could tell from our earliest conversations with Neil, later with Lisa, this was a family that cared deeply about the safety of their children.
If the knowledge of how long a child should be in their car seat for, whether it be height, weight, age, and for it to be as illegal as not wearing a seatbelt, might save lives. Might have saved Sam's childhood. Might have saved the grief, the impact we live every day.
It's important to remember that the laws outline the minimum child car restraint requirements. Even though our children appear tall in our eyes, most children up to 10 to 12 years of age will still require a booster seat to obtain a good seatbelt fit while travelling in the vehicle.
Seatbelts save lives. They are a very important part of the safety systems that a car affords. But unfortunately, they need the person wearing that seatbelt to be of the right stature for that seatbelt to bring its safety to the body in the event of a crash. When we are too short or too small in stature, the seatbelt, rather cruelly and ironically, whilst it does afford some protection, brings in new dangers.
The risk of serious injury can be increased by up to 3.5 times for children who still fit in a booster seat but don't use one.
Sam had a very prominent bruise on his neck, and as Sam was too short to sit safely without a booster seat, that's exactly where the sash would have been. So in the moment of the crash, the high cervical injury would have been contributed to by the presence of the seatbelt in a way that could have been prevented or reduced had he been elevated in that seat by a booster seat.
It's a no-brainer. My life, my son's life, could be completely different if he was made to stay in a car seat. He was only 11 years old.
At the moment, we are faced with the situation where we have best practice safety guidelines, and they are clear that a child needs to be of sufficient stature to be seated safely with a lap sash seatbelt alone. Until that time, they need to be in a booster seat once they have outgrown their forward-facing harness restraint type. Unfortunately, the laws that we have, which are very helpfully unified between all the states of territories of Australia, those laws bear no resemblance to that best practice. The best practice has become more informed with time. The laws have not moved with that best practice.
The 5-step test is a parent's best indication of whether a child is ready for an adult seatbelt or not.
Can the child sit all the way back against the vehicle seat back? Do the child's knees bend comfortably in front of the front edge of the vehicle seat? Is the lap belt sitting low across the hip bones, touching the thighs? Does the sash belt sit across the middle of the shoulder, not on the neck or out near the arm? Can the child stay seated like this for the whole trip?
If all of the answers to the 5-step test are yes, then parents can feel confident that their child is ready for an adult seatbelt. If they're not sure, or if their children don't quite pass, it's just not worth the risk.
Leave your kids in their car seats as long as you can.
Let's keep our children restrained in the safest way for as long as possible until their stature demands that they must move to the next restraint type.
Just do it. You've just got to remember who the parent is and explain to them that this is something that will keep you alive. It will keep you safe. And the only people that can see you in the car, in a car seat, is the people in the car. And the people in the car are the ones that care about you the most.